Well, it's January, and I know a lot of us have seasonal affective disorder because we are light deprived. It's also the coldest time of year, so those of us that are gardeners, we're not getting outside. And my point is that regardless of why you may be feeling blue, you may be worried, you may be going stir crazy, you may be ill from the pandemic, whatever the source of your unhappiness, I thought I would share today some simple little happiness boosters that have helped me, and also address a couple of questions I've gotten recently. And someone asked me if I was just naturally a happy person and if I was born with the sun on my face, and I really thought through that question, and the answer is no. I was not naturally a happy person growing up. My mom died when I was very young. It was very difficult. I came from a large family. It was a sad time. I lost a number of loved ones in my early adulthood. I was very, very fortunate to have wonderful but very strict parents, and no, I think I kind of was born, in my younger years, I think I kind of had a chip on my shoulder. And so the reason that I am happier now is because I have really worked on it, and I put things in perspective and just made myself get over myself. And the reason I sometimes say that I am organized is because I am instinctively so disorganized. The reason that I try to be a good gardener is because I'm instinctively maybe a lazy gardener. And so for me, it's kind of, I just try to work on and be the opposite maybe of how some of my more negative character flaws are. And I think I can genuinely say that now someone who was kind of surly and grumpy and a curmudgeon in her youth is now more of a naturally happy person. Stuart, would you say that's true? Am I a happy person to be around? So I thought that was an interesting question, and it made me think through it, so I thank you for that. Something else that makes me very, very happy is that yesterday I got, unexpectedly, it came out early, a copy of my new book, and this makes me very, very happy, and I will share more about it later. But there are so many beautiful pictures in here, most of which Stuart took, and it's just kind of a story of my garden, and it's, anyhow, it was an act of love, so it made me happy to get it. You guys know how to order it, but I recognize that not everyone can afford a $30 book. So if you can't, I would just ask you to request that your local library purchase it. This is a tip from Stuart's mom, Susu, who helps us out here. She is a librarian, and she said if you just call your local library, they will get in a copy. So you guys know I love my library, so it will be an honor for me to have a book that I have written on the library shelves. And then I also finally I ordered myself one of my own calendars. And this is the large size, but if you guys want to order one of these calendars, you can get it off of Zazzle and do what I do. Again, it could be a little bit pricey at full price. But what I do, and I just always wait till they have a sale, and then I just buy it at 25% off or 50% off or 20% off, whatever. And I do like to think that they make nice gifts, and Valentine's Day is coming up, so there's a little plug for my own products. So on to my first tip. This was inspired by a book that I read, The English Patient. And if you have read it, you know that it's about a nurse during World War II who was taking care of an Englishman who had been very, very badly burned in the war. And she is taking care of him out in a villa that has been abandoned, and it's got, if you haven't read the book, I highly, highly recommend it. But there was one passage in there where she would say that she would treat herself, and it would, and I'm probably paraphrasing, it would give her a little happiness booster, and she would go out into the courtyard with some like fingernail scissors or small scissors, something of that nature. And she said because it just gave her great joy and a sense of control, she would take like a 12 by 12 foot or a 12 inch by 12 inch area, and she would just mow the lawn or trim that little section with her fingernail scissors. And she said it gave her so much joy and a sense of control. So periodically, when it's too cold to work outside, when I'm feeling worried about something or out of control, the world is so crazy right now, that I will periodically do this what I call 12 inch by 12 inch happiness booster. So this happens to be an area that I traverse frequently because I'm always taking out the trash through this gate. And I have this little area here. It's been extremely windy lately. And I have this whole area here where all sorts of redbud seed heads have blown in, and it looks unkempt and kind of messy. And I see it every day when I walk out to take out the trash. So I periodically will just take one 12 inch by 12 inch area and really clean it up and groom it. You can do this in your house, in a closet, but for me it's important that it be in an area where I will notice it and appreciate its new state as I make my daily rounds. So I'm just kind of cleaning up this little area here. It's right in front of the fireplace. And typically, I promise you, this is another probably little trick to being organized and neat and habit change. I usually notice that once I get started, it goes well beyond just a 12 by 12 inch area. But I'll just take a little area and I will clean it up and get it looking tidy and groomed. If I need to, I will kind of replenish the gravel. I'll then take this bucket to my compost pile. And like I say, it's hard for me to stop once I start because it's so gratifying. But I have one area then that is nicely groomed, and when I go in and out that gate, I feel an immediate sense of accomplishment that if nothing else, I've gotten something done for that day, and it just gives me a little small boost of happiness and control over my daily rounds. So there you go. There is my little tip on 12 by 12 inch happiness. You might want to try, give it a try to see if it works for you. My question of the day is, do you do anything small like this that helps you feel a little bit more in control and gives you a little burst of joy or happiness when you're feeling blue, worried, or depressed? So that's my question of the day. Now let's move on to the next one. Well, I hope you get a little vicarious jolt, a little vicarious mood boost out of this next tip. And this is what I think of as making something dull shine. And that can be anything. But I noticed around Christmas time that I started polishing my silver, something I hadn't done in forever. And it gave me such a little jolt of joy to do it. And so I realized it was because I love making dull things shine, whether that's cleaning my windows, exfoliating my skin, really whatever it is, I like to make something dull shiny. And so here we go. I've got 2 silver spoons here. Stuart asked what was I doing with a swastika. I said, oh, that's not a swastika. This is an antique Anasazi symbol of a spoon that my husband gave me a number of years ago, actually for Valentine's Day. And so what I'm going to do is I am just going to shine this up. And you can do this obviously with any silver you have. A friend of my mother-in-law's, Marilyn Roth, she used to do this in the middle of the night when she would wake up and she couldn't get back to sleep. She collected old silver, and she used to do this in the middle of the night, and she said it just kind of soothed her and was a nice de-stressor. So I am using some of this Wright's Silver Cream. I got it off of Amazon. And periodically, you guys, sorry Stuart, periodically I will also do this with pieces of silver jewelry I have. And I think one of the reasons I didn't do it more frequently was because I kind of like the look, actually, of things that are tarnished. I like the fact that it looks old. But in, how long did that take, Stuart? Less than a minute. And I could definitely do a better job on this, but in less than a minute, I have really shined up something. It just makes me happy. And now I can use this in a sugar bowl. Actually, I think I'm going to use it upstairs in my bathroom for bath salts. So there is something that you can do. And by the way, it's a wonderful thing to do when you've got, I have all sorts of these little baby spoons, silver baby spoons that my boys had when they were little. And you sometimes kind of don't know what to do with them. Well, this is a way that you can transform something like this into something more useful and maybe use it on your bar, or again, use it in a sugar bowl, or sometimes even if I've got supplements or something like that that we need to take, you could put it kind of in your medicine bowl. Obviously this one needs a little bit more work, but it's just a fun way to brighten up, recycle, and repurpose something that you've got in your drawer, and it gives you just a little bolt of happiness, bolt and jolt of happiness. So make something that's dull shiny. Well, this may seem like a strange one, but it's something that I rediscovered recently, and that is ironing. Now, how I came to this is because there was a period of time over the holidays when I was really pretty worried about something, and I was too unhappy, I guess, to be very productive. So I just found that I kind of just laid around, and for the first time in years, I watched way too much TV. I had never, before the holidays, ever binge watch any show. And I found myself binge watching different shows, and then afterwards I wouldn't have gotten anything done. I wouldn't have been moving. I wouldn't have been very productive. And I just felt icky. If you guys can relate to that. I wasn't being productive, but then I was kind of depressed and I didn't have enough energy to do anything else. So I went back to my youth, and I remember how I grew up in a family of 10, and we girls had to do all of the ironing for the entire family. And I remembered that when I was younger, I would do the ironing as I would watch old movies. And so I thought, well, maybe I should find my ironing board, pull it out, and do some ironing while I am binge watching these TV shows that make me feel kind of guilty because I'm not being productive. And lo and behold, it really did. I found it kind of soothing. Since I'm always cold in the wintertime, the fact that it is warm and it exudes heat I found it comforting. I found that it made me feel as if I was creating order out of disorder. And then when I would see these things, like here, you guys know that I wear all of these bandanas in the summertime, and typically I don't iron them. But when I was cleaning out my jewelry closet, I found this just basically a pile of them. And I thought, you know what? I'm just going to iron all of my bandanas and have them in a nice, neat stack when I look in my jewelry closet. And it will make me feel again as if I have a little bit of control in a world where I have not a lot of control. And if you are sensing a pattern there, then yes, most of the time I am unhappy or whatever, it's because I feel out of control, either because of someone's illness or sometimes it might be financial difficulties. We've often heard that expression, you're only as happy as your most unhappy child. And so sometimes if I'm worried about my kids or whatever, then I just feel out of control. This almost instantaneously not only distracts me from my woes because I'm watching something on TV, but it also makes me feel as if I'm restoring a little bit of order to my chaotic world, and it makes me feel as if I'm just a little bit mini productive. So there is my third mood booster, which is a little bit strange, but ironing. Well, this little happiness boost I discovered when my boys were little, and I don't know it so much as a mood booster as it is a healthy distractor. So when my kids were young, they suffered all of the same kinds of angst that children typically do. So when my younger son Jamie would have missed the last free throw in a basketball game and he was torturing himself and thought that he had lost the game, or when my older son was in high school and had asked, I think he was a freshman, and he'd asked a senior out to the prom or something like that, and he was devastated when she turned him down. Those kinds of superficial childhood angst that you had, but then can also be, I think, interpreted in another way when you're older and you are worried about something and you just can't get it out of your head and you don't have the energy to do anything else and you just need a distraction. Well, here is a really good mood boosting distraction, and that is, and I don't have one here because it's hard to have a show and tell for this one, but that is to listen to a book on tape or listen to an audio version of something that you love. So with my kids, I would put on all of the audio books of Harry Potter. They loved them growing up. The story, of course, was so compelling, and they also loved them because it made them feel kind of warm and fuzzy because it made them remembering them. So on some occasions, even when they were in junior high and in high school, if they were really stressed out and they just couldn't keep their mind from going to those dark places and overanalyzing situations, I would put on the Harry Potter books for them and they would find it really comforting and very soothing. So I started doing the same, and when I really feel like life is difficult and I feel like the world is picking on me, what I like to listen to are memoirs, because that, again, it puts things in relief and it puts things in perspective, that not only do bad things happen to other people besides just me, but it also is so inspiring because I can hear then how other people were able to navigate through a hard time, transcend a hard time, come up with coping mechanisms, and in most cases, there is nice redemption at the end. So recently, I've been listening to the memoir by Katie Couric. Prior to that, I listened to a fascinating memoir by Alexandra Fuller, who grew up in Africa. I love to listen to historical memoirs, pieces of history, because they make me realize that during times like these, there have always been times like these. And I am not the first, it ain't my first rodeo, and it isn't humanity's first rodeo. And so I find it really inspiring. I get lost in their story. And quite often it gives me tips on how I can reframe something that is sad to me or reframe something that seems very problematic and reframe it as a challenge or an opportunity. So that would be my fourth tip, is listening to something that is inspiring to you, but will also distract you from whatever is making you blue or down in the dumps. Well, obviously, fresh flowers are always a happiness booster, and I love orchids, and I kind of overindulge in orchids, but trust me, they give me a jolt of joy every time I come in here. But something else recently really gave me a jolt of joy, and I think through these past couple of years with the pandemic and social unrest and the politicalization of our society and everything, I think we're constantly bombarded with the effects of, gosh, what next? What next unexpected horror or thing are we going to have challenge? Are we going to have to confront? And then something really wonderful happened, and that is a sister of mine got engaged. Now, she and I have always been extremely close. She is now in her 50s, and I didn't get married until I was in my 30s, and we both used to say we were never going to get married. We were part of that. We were more likely to be shot by a terrorist than find a husband generation, and we had on our refrigerator a wonderful card. My parents got such a kick out of it because she and I, we were constantly teasing each other. And there I found a card that showed two old women that were standing over a tombstone, and the caption on the inside was, "Melissa and Beatrice would leave no stone unturned in their pursuit of the perfect man." And I got such a kick out of that, and I sent it to my sister, because at that time we both were in despair that we would never find a man. Well, I finally found one in my 30s, and she and I were both kind of young career, single professional career women for a long time. She has her PhD. She's extremely accomplished. And I think after a while, marriage just wasn't a priority to her, until she just recently met, or I shouldn't say recently, about 2 years ago, met the love of her life. And in their late 50s, they are getting married. They could not be happier. They're absolutely thrilled. Her life has completely done a 360. And the message there is that I remind myself to give myself a little jolt of happiness, is that not only do unexpected bad things happen, but sometimes really unexpected wonderful things happen. And when I reframed it that way, now I find myself continually looking for really unexpected, wonderful things to happen. And I am just much more aware of them. I'm much more mindful, and I find myself looking for them. So there's another kind of technique to make you feel a little bit better, is not only do unexpected bad things happen, but sometimes really wonderful, unexpected, great things happen. And speaking of unexpected things that happened that you were not looking for, and they were just very unexpected, and that is that Stuart and I, now, we met how many years ago, Stuart? 4 years ago or whatever, and we just kind of immediately hit it off. But who knew that he and I would become best buds and business partners, and that his family members would become, I consider them family members of mine. And who knew, Stuart, that would happen? So speaking of unexpected little joys, this next one is, again, I don't have much of a show and tell for it, but I have found myself doing this a lot. So whenever I am feeling, like my life isn't exactly as I would like it, i.e. perfect, and whose is, and particularly I noticed that I was doing this during periods of time when I was feeling unsettled, or like I don't know, like my life just wasn't where I wanted it to be. So what I found that I would do is I would go instead of going forward in time, I would go backward in time, and I would compare my present self and how I was to my younger self and think, what would the younger version of yourself think of the older version of yourself? And when I put it in that framework, I quit feeling so down about myself, and I started feeling like, okay, well, I have accomplished some things. So my early 30-year-old self, who wasn't married, who just worked all of the time, I didn't think I'd ever have a family. I just wasn't very happy about things. I had a bad relationship, or a relationship go sour. And then I think, well, what would that person then think of the person that I am now, that is happily married, has 2 wonderful, wonderful sons. I have great friends. I've written a book. I never thought I could write a book. I never thought I could have a beautiful garden like the one I lusted after, and I do have that. So other areas of my life that I am dissatisfied about kind of then pale in comparison to when I think about, okay, what would that 30-year-old person have thought of my now 60-plus something person? Well, she would think that ain't such a bad place to be, so quit feeling sorry for yourself. Look at what you have accomplished, not what you have yet to accomplish, and try to just make that constant inner critic just shut up. And I had wonderful parents, but they were both, I think, pretty highly critical, and they were the kind of, not then uncommon of that era, but parents who would more often find you doing something wrong than ever catch you doing something right. And so you sometimes felt like enough wasn't ever enough, and you tend to grow up with that mindset. And I think now that I'm a little bit older and hopefully a little bit wiser, I now don't think, well, what would my parents think, or what, whatever. I think, what would the younger version of myself think about the older version of myself? And I think that younger person would say, okay, you ain't such a bad broad. I kind of like who you've turned out to be. So just give yourself a break. So compare your younger self to your older self. Go back in time and try to put a new perspective on where you are at this point in your life when you're feeling kind of down on yourself. Well, obviously, trimming my topiaries makes me happy, and that is probably next on my agenda. And Stuart, if you would show how dirty my windows are. And one of the things I asked for Christmas was to have my windows cleaned, the storm windows, the whole shebang. I haven't had that done in years. And so that's an example of making something that is dull shiny. And Hubs was so sweet, and he gave me a gift certificate, and we're working on that process right now, kind of having to work around the weather. Okay, this last one is born of a discussion I had with a friend of mine the other day. And just look for anything. No matter how bad things are, just look for anything you can hang your hat on. And I was talking to this friend who's been really going through a difficult time. Her father's ill. She is suffering from some health issues of her own. I had recently been really sick over the holidays, and we were both just kind of grousing and griping, and we both kind of looked at each other like, oh my gosh, we've got to put a stop to this. And so I said, okay, for this moment in time, let's find one thing. No, obviously, it is not lost on me how fortunate I am, and the irony of me even saying that. But we both looked at each other, and I said, okay, here is my thing that at this moment in time I am so grateful for. And I think sometimes now we talk about gratitude as a way to be a mood elevator and help alleviate depression. And I think it's almost become a cliche. But in the James Clear methodology of really breaking it down into things that are granular, this is what I came up with. And I said, here is something at this moment I do not ever want to take for granted. I don't care how unhappy I am, how destitute I am, or whatever. But in that moment in time, if I am not nauseated and I am not throwing up, then life is good. And over the past year, I had a couple of different episodes where I ended up in the emergency room because I just was so sick. And I just am appreciating it right now. Nothing to me is worse than being nauseated. And so right now, the fact that I am not nauseated just immediately makes me feel better, in addition to all of the other wonderful things I have to feel good about. And she laughed and she said, "You're not." And I said, "No, I am not hugging the porcelain." And she said, "And you know what? My legs that have been bothering me for months, my sciatica and everything," she said, "at this moment in time right now, I just realized my legs are not hurting." And so we both high-fived each other and said, well, at this moment in time, I am not puking and you can walk without pain. And that is something to be happy about. And we started out complaining and we both ended up in kind of a fit of giggles. And I think sometimes we just have to even if it's something as simple as, I'm happy, I'm healthy, my family is happy and healthy. No matter what else is falling apart around you, you at least have those things. And so I will leave you with that. My number 7, right now, I am getting just a huge serotonin and happiness boost by the fact that I am not nauseated. So let me know what little or big things help you pull out of a funk and make you happier today. Well, I don't know if I recommended this book or not as a Christmas present, but it's definitely a wonderful New Year's present. It is Atomic Habits by James Clear. I am completely obsessed with this book. And by the way, you guys, typically when I find a book that I'm interested in, I will check it out from the library first if it's available, and then if I really like it, I'll go ahead and buy it. Definitely, if you are interested in changing some habits, then this is a book you're going to want to buy, not just loan from your library, because I have all sorts of things underlined. I've got pages dog-eared, because it's all about tiny changes, remarkable results. It's one of the better habit formation books that I have ever read. James Clear is wonderful, and it has really great recommendations on the back, which also kind of motivated me to go ahead and buy it. So I would highly recommend this. And in accordance with some of the advice in this book, Tiny Changes, Remarkable Results, I thought I would share 7 things that I am doing this year to make my life easier in the next 365 days in the year ahead. So these are going to be, I'm going to go through them, 7 tiny changes with 7 remarkable results. Now, obviously, you guys probably have your own recommendations that you want to make, and that's my question of the day, because it's all about trying to be the best version of ourselves. I know that sounds kind of corny, but nevertheless, I really feel inspired at the new year to be the best version of myself in both spiritual, physical, mental, all sorts of ways. I want to be the best version of myself. So therein lies my motivation for developing some new habits. So this is going to be a whole thing about 7 tiny changes with 7 remarkable results, I hope. Now, the things that I've selected are based on what I consider to be, for me, the impediments that keep me from living more easily and effortlessly, and also in a better, more healthy way. Starting with, I think I shared with you that on Christmas Day, I ended up in the ER. in Colorado, and I have a stomach condition that flares up periodically, and because it was the holidays, I just wasn't very good about packing, and I left the medication that I need to take. When I had these kind of flare-ups, I left them at home, and I wasn't organized enough to have them with me, and I couldn't get them because it was the Christmas weekend and I couldn't get new prescriptions, and all the 24-hour pharmacies were closed. So that leads me in a roundabout way to my very first seven remarkable changes from habits, and that is I'm going to be more prepared. Another impediment I have is that sometimes I'm not very good about going on little short sojourns or vacations or things like that because I hate to pack. So that's my impediment that I identified. I hate to pack. So what I'm trying to do, and I've been doing this, but now I'm going to improve upon it. I keep a small train bag packed with all the toiletries and makeup items I need, so that I can just leave town on a whim. And I'll try to put a link to this Mark, it looks like a Mark Cross case, but it's a train case from Mark and Graham. And I keep all of the things that I need, my toiletries, my makeup, and all sorts of different things in it. Now, one thing that I'm going to keep in here religiously, because otherwise I will forget to pack it, is the medication that I need whenever I go out of town. I may need it, I might not, but I'm going to feel more secure when I do leave town if I have it. So I've got a duplicate of my prescriptions that I will keep in here all of the time so that I never forget them. And then I am not only ready to go with my makeup bag and all of my toiletries and such, but I'll also have my medications in place. Another thing that I'm going to do, which I will share with you a little bit later, is making sure that I have all of the proper documentation for my prescriptions, for my husband's prescriptions, our vaccination records, and I'm going to show you how I keep all of that organized. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to upgrade my cosmetic bag that will be ready to roll whenever I am. I'm also going to do that with other items in my regular suitcase. So while I've always kept duplicates of my toiletries and things of that nature in my cosmetic bag, I haven't kept duplicates of other things. So, not to be indelicate, I'm going to treat myself this year to a whole brand new set of bras and underwear and workout socks, etc., that I will keep in here at all times. So I won't have to pack them. All I will then have to pack are the outfits that I'm going to be wearing on that trip. So this will be ready to go. My husband will be thrilled because I won't have that impediment of hating to pack to keep me from living my best big life. So that is my recommendation number one. Really upgrade your preparation. Be prepared so that when you're ready to go out of town, you can do it effortlessly. Let me know if you're going to try this on day one of our 7-day challenge. Well, on day 2 of this 7-day organizational bonanza, I'm going to try to help myself get a little bit more digitally organized. Remember the good old days when all we had to do was just clean out our drawers and our closets and our junk drawer? Now we've got to do that same thing with all of our digital assets. So that would include your phone and all of your chargers and things. So along the same lines of being ready to rock and roll if I want to go out of town, I'm keeping a mesh bag filled with all different varieties of chargers that I might need for my phone, for my iWatch, for my laptop, whatever I need. I keep them all in a little mesh bag. They're duplicates of the originals that I keep at home, and I will have this along with my other luggage and my other takeaways so that I can be ready to travel on a moment's notice. The other thing that I'm doing is I'm going through and trying to really clean up and streamline my phone. So I've gotten rid of a lot of apps that I don't use, or I have organized those apps. And one app I find absolutely indispensable if you use an iPhone, it's called the Notes app. If you have a different kind of Android, then a different kind of smartphone, there might be something equivalent, but it's just the Notes app. And within that, I create all sorts of different folders that really keep me organized. So one thing that I've done is I have one folder that is just strictly medical information. So I have all of Hub's prescriptions listed. I've got all of my prescriptions listed. I've got a copy of our vaccination records. I've got a copy of our insurance cards. All of that information is in the Notes app. So if for some reason I lose my wallet, or I need to find out immediately what medications my husband is on, I've got them all in a neat folder under medical information in my Notes app. And I use this in so many fun ways. Stuart can tell you, I love quotations and I love just words in general. So I have a separate folder that I call quotations, so that if ever I want to go back and ruminate on some topic or whatever, then I might have a quotation that I've already got in my little inventory. I've got something that I call personal superpowers. I've got a folder called personal superpowers. And whenever I come up with an idea or some advice or whatever it is, I put that in my superpowers folder, because later on when I'm struggling with some kind of issue or whatever, I can go back to that folder and there might be some little bit of wisdom in there that will help me feel a little bit better. Obviously, you can use all sorts of different categories. I've got one called recipes I want to try. I've got one, if I want to track all of my bills, I keep a record of every bill that comes in. You can use photographic information in here. I can do a screenshot and put it in that specific category. So it has helped me tremendously stay organized, and it's all right here in my handheld device. Well, my desk is an absolute mess. I am once again rearranging my office, and I'll show that to you a little bit later on what I've got in mind. But I'm getting ready to clean off my desk and do a couple of other things on this day 3 of my challenges to get myself organized and simplify my life for the new year. So one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go through my entire email inventory, and anything that is just not that necessary, I am going to unsubscribe from every one of those websites that I subscribed to get a discount, or because I thought it was something I might find interesting later. And all that's doing is just cluttering up my inbox. So I'm going to take the time one day, I'll get a cup of hot tea, maybe a crumpet or a scone or something. I'll make it as charming as possible. And then I'm going to just go through the monotony of looking at all of the things that I've signed up for and unsubscribing from any that no longer interest me. And even though I hope you are subscribed to my email, and if you're not, go to lindavotter.com and subscribe. If my email or my subscription is in your inventory of ones you don't want to look at anymore, then I just encourage you to unsubscribe from me. That will really clear out a lot of the mess and give you a lot more clarity, and definitely a lot more time when you go through your emails. Another thing that I really recommend, and I discovered this because when my parents were, when I was paying all the bills and taking care of my parents' paperwork and such, I had all of their mail forwarded to me. Consequently, I started getting all sorts of junk mail on every topic imaginable, all sorts of catalogs and things of that nature. Well, there's a program called catalogchoice.com, and you can take a snapshot of it, upload it, and it will then ultimately, hopefully, stop you from repeatedly getting those unwanted things, those unwanted pieces of junk mail in your mailbox. So you might try that. Try unsubscribing from anything you're no longer interested in, both physically through catalog choice and also in your digital life. Well, as you're going through your closet, make a special category for those things that need to be either altered or in some way changed. And I'm going to really fuss at Stuart on this one, Stuart, because one of those things on this day 4 of kind of getting your act together is to have any shoes, belts, bags, anything of that nature that needs to be mended. Take them to your shoe repair place, take them to wherever it is that you go, so that you will really use those things in your closet that you're not using right now because they're either too big or they're broken or they need to be altered. So I've got 3 things in my category. You guys know I love to thrift, and periodically I'll find really beautiful, great belts and things of that nature, but they're huge, either because they were a men's belt or they're just too large for me. So I've got a whole category of belts that I'm going to take. I'm going to have them put some more holes in them and do it professionally. I'm going to have some of them actually shortened and re-sewn so that they aren't quite as large. I've got some hunter boots that need repair. You can see here how the buckle on this side has become detached. I'm going to take this. I'm just going to have a great big box filled with things that I take to the shoe repair place. I'm also going to have another category of clothing items that I'm going to take that need to be altered. I haven't worn them because they're too big or they're too small or something about them just doesn't fit right, because I'm somebody who will often pay, gosh, $4 or $5 for something that I find that I think is a great buy at the thrift store, and then sometimes spend a lot to alter it. But if that makes me wear it and that makes it valuable in my wardrobe, then I think it's more than worth the expense. So I bought this Calvin Klein trench coat a while ago. I found that I haven't worn it, and it's simply because it's just too big. So I'm going to take this to my alteration lady. I'm going to have the sleeves shortened, and I've got a couple of other things that are just a little bit too big, and I want them to have kind of a more tailored look. It really ups the ante, and I think really ups your style, because it makes it look like things are so much more form-fitting and expensive. So that is my recommendation number 4. Take the time, get it all in one location, and then take them to the shoe repair place or to your alteration and tailor location to get those things fixed, so you'll absolutely and positively refresh your wardrobe and use them in the new year. Well, most of us probably have eating healthier on our resolution list for 2022, and I am one of those. This past year, I just have had very little interest in cooking, and I want to start cooking a little bit more again, not only because it's healthier, but also because I don't want to lose cooking as kind of a basic life skill. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select 3 new healthy, delicious meals that I keep in my regular meal rotation. And I'm going to go through my cookbooks, and I'm going to identify 3 of them. I might even have Hubs help me with that. We have all of these cookbooks that seldom ever get used, and so this will be a way that I can keep it manageable. I can keep this resolution in bite-sized bits. And I can also, it's kind of a twofer, because then I will also be eating more healthily, but also exercising my cooking muscle. So I'm going to select 3 meals out of these that I pretty much always have the ingredients on hand for to add into my regular meal rotation. So that is my recommendation number 5. You guys, please let me know if you've got anything that's just an easy, healthy, throw it together weeknight meal. Let me know what your recipe is, and I'll share mine with you a little bit later in the month. Well, if there's one single thing that you could do to really get you motivated to get organized for 2022, my recommendation would be to clean out your junk drawer. Because I know you have one, we all have one, and even though I regularly tidy it up, it nevertheless gets overwhelmed with pens and just all sorts of just junk. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean this out. I'm going to get rid of the thousands of pens that are in here. I don't need that many. I'm going to make sure that I have the contents that I do need in here in terms of rubber bands and thumbtacks and things of that nature. But then I'm going to do something a little bit different. So I'm going to talk a little bit more softly because I don't want Hubs to hear this. I am always looking for things like tape measures and my tape and things like that, and then he will take them out of the drawer and he doesn't put them back, and then I can't find them. So I'm going to hide them at the back where only I will know where they are, and he will just have to have his own in his new office upstairs. Sometimes you have to keep certain things from your spouse, and this is one of them. So I'm going to hide my tape measure, which is always being taken, my downstairs phone charger, which is always being taken, and other kinds of things like that just mysteriously disappear when I need them most. And I'm going to hide those at the back. So there you go. Clean out your junk drawer. Make sure that you have on hand what you want when you want it, and categorize things and organize things in your junk drawer according to the way your household rocks and rolls. Well, my seventh organizational method might seem a little bit lame, but it really works for me, and it's so simple, but it has drastically transformed my life. And that is, we all have areas where stuff just collects. Papers, bills, mail, for me sometimes candles, just any kind of the detritus of life. It just collects in different places on almost any flat surface. Well, I've got one area, it's right by my junk drawer, and that's where stuff just seems to collect, and I'm constantly going through that pile, and it's kind of unsightly. So what I've started doing is I just keep a basket there now. That way I can easily remove the entirety of my pile and relocate it someplace else so that it's not in the way until I have a chance to do a deep dive into what all is in that basket. So right now I've got mail that belongs to my neighbors, I've got lists, I've got just different kinds of things in here. And for some reason, just having it contained in a basket makes me feel as if it's a little bit more manageable, and I don't have it spread out all over the place. So try that. Any place, any surface you have where things just collect, try just using a large basket to corral it all. And finally, this is kind of a bonus one that I'm really working on, again, from experience, because I got sick over the holidays. I think partially also attributed to the fact that I was pretty dehydrated, and that's I'm trying to improve and increase my water intake. So this is a funny little tip, but I've been doing it for the past 5 days, and it's really made a difference. I always have ice water with me to take a sip, and I'll take one sip and then I'll put it back down. Well, now I'm trying to train myself that whenever I lift it up to take a sip, instead of just taking one sip, I take 5, and that way I am multiplying 5 times how much water I get throughout the course of the day. It doesn't really take any more time. It's satisfying. It's a no biggie, but I have found just that one simple little thing has really made me more mindful of drinking more fluids, water in particular, and it will just keep me hydrated going into the gardening season. So there you go, some tips that I hope you you might try to employ to make your life a little bit easier. Identify those impediments and try to do an end around. And make sure to share in the comments below any other brilliant tips, techniques, and organizational things that you might have that will make all of our lives better and easier in 2022. So I thought today it might be fun to talk about 5 things that I think keep you looking and acting young and youthful, and also make you feel more energized and enthusiastic as you get older, as I am definitely. So I'm going to just talk about 5 things that I've alluded to in the past, but this will concentrate them into 5 specific tips that you guys can share your thoughts with me about how you try to magnify and manifest these kinds of tips in your life. And of course, give me any of your own suggestions on how I might improve my quality of life going forward. So I'm going to back up a little bit and tell you a couple of stories related to each one of these things, because I am a questioner. And I just asked you my question of the day. Please make sure to respond and comment on what tips you have for me, but you guys know that I'm a questioner. And I try to figure things out, and I kind of try to deconstruct things. And that not only includes garden design and garden design tips and ways to be more efficient in the garden, but it also includes how I look at living your life and lifestyle tips and different personalities and things. So my number 1 is to, I think, look more youthful and appear younger and more energetic. Good posture and how you carry yourself is so important. And lately I told you that I am really trying to improve this in my own life. I've paired this with that. So when I walk through a door frame, I try to tell myself to stand up straighter. I've tried to start doing that a little bit more when I sit, because I tend to be a real sloucher, and that puts pressure on my lower back, which in my world is already pretty compromised. So I'm trying to tell myself, and I'm sure you can just hear your mom say, don't slouch, stand up taller. You know, I will sometimes tell my husband, stand up tall and you'll look, 20 pounds lighter, 10 years younger, or whatever. And believe me, it's something that I have to practice myself. Now, in terms of how I deconstructed this, let me tell you a really fun little story. And it's my meet and greet with Cary Grant. So many years ago, I was director of admissions at a local university here, and it was known for its School of Performing Arts. And parenthetically, nod Stewart, shout out to Stewart's daughter Julia, who is a scholarship student there in their music department. But they have a wonderful music and performing arts department, and because of that, they would always hold these big galas and money raisers and things. And for one of the guest appearances and guests at this kind of cocktail party that we had for him was Cary Grant, who at that point in time was probably in his upper 70s, maybe mid 70s, upper 70s. And let me tell you, the man was as elegant at that age as he was in his youth when he was still making a lot of movies and things. And I can remember looking at him and thinking, what is it about you that makes you look so attractive and so energized and so youthful? And actually it was just all in the way he carried and moved himself. His posture was wonderful. He had ease getting up and out of chairs. He just seemed to move through a space very easily and seamlessly. And I'm sure it's because he was a physical actor and he worked on that over his entire life. He got started, I think, as a trapeze artist or in the circus or something of that nature. Stewart's mom is kind of going, really? Yes, he really started out doing a lot more physical comedy and things. And because of that, he was always attentive to how he carried himself. And of course, course, he's known for his elegant stature and posture. And I can remember deconstructing it at the time while I was also very much swooning and salivating over how gorgeous he was. I was in my 20s, he was in his 70s. It didn't make any difference. Every decade of women there was absolutely smitten with Cary Grant. So that is my number one tip: to look youthful and energetic, and that is be mindful of your posture and how you carry yourself. It costs nothing other than a constant reminder to ourselves to stand up and fly right. Now let's move on to the next one. Now, Stuart just asked me if I was holding this book as part of my second episode or second tip, and I wasn't, but I'm holding it because I wanted to remind you of this. My daughter-in-law got one of these for Christmas, and I looked at hers, and I immediately loved it and ordered one for myself. And it is a no recipes cookbook. And what I love about it is it just tells you what ingredients go well together, but with no proportions. So if you're like Stuart and me, we tend to just cook by taste and by flavors, not necessarily by ingredient amounts. So you might want to check this out. Stuart, let's try to put an Amazon link. I also love the fact that it's just a really good looking book. Okay, so speaking of good looking and appearances and how you make a first impression, we've all heard that you never have a chance to make you never have a second chance to make a first impression. So I think first impressions are important, but more important, I think that paying attention to your appearance and to how you dress and carry yourself. I don't consider it vanity. I don't consider it affectation. I consider it as showing respect to yourself. And because when I put a little effort into making myself look more presentable and more stylish, then I feel better about myself. I like the fact that it's an exercise in creativity, putting together an ensemble, matching earrings. It's a little bolt of joy for me every day when I pick out my earrings. It helps me reuse, recycle, and repurpose what I have already got in my closet. Most of the time I'm working out in the garden, so even if I've got on something kind of nice, I don't care, because chances are it's not like it used to be back in olden times where you would literally wear out your clothing and you only had one good dress or one casual dress. Most of us are fortunate that we have a lot of things in our closet, and I take great joy in wearing those things in my closet, inside or out. And especially if it's, like I say, it's an exercise in creativity by putting together different colors and textures and proportions of things. Just as I like to do that in the garden and in garden design, I like to do that in my wardrobe as well. The other thing is, I think if you're going through a real downtime, it just gives you a little pepper-upper. There's been a number of times recently over the holidays when I just didn't feel very good. I was kind of sickly. And finally I decided, you need to pull yourself out of this. Get up, take a shower, wash your hair, put on some makeup, and it did make me feel better and more energized. I think it's also kind of respectful to the other people around you. I think it's kind of respectful to my husband and my children and people in my life if they think that I went to a little bit of effort for them. It doesn't mean necessarily that you have to have a full face of makeup or expensive clothing. It just needs to look, whether you're dressed up or dressed down, as if you put a little bit of effort into it, as if you brushed your teeth and brushed your hair. And I think that's really important. It's also something that I put into a category of what I call things I have learned from delivering so many eulogies. I'm at a period in my life and I am at a position in my family where I have been called upon to deliver a number of eulogies for loved ones in my family. I am very proud to do it. it is an expression of love from me to them, but also to my loved ones who are still surviving. And what I have found is, as I write the eulogies about the people, a lot of times, in addition to their deeper qualities about how kind and loving they were, how smart they were, or how creative they were, there's also certain physical expressions about them that everyone remembers and that are real touchstones to their personality. And this especially comes to mind with my mother-in-law, who passed a year ago in February, and she was 91. She lived a wonderful life. She didn't have to go into assisted living until maybe the last 6 months of her life. And I loved this story, and I loved telling this story about her because she expressed herself in her style and in how she comported herself to the very end. So much so that when she got on hospice, the hospice nurse asked her permission and the permission of her loved ones if she could be a poster child for hospice care, because she just was so stylish and so put together and so cute. And I loved that story about her. She took great delight in it. Her daughter took great delight in it. I did. She was never without her large statement earrings. She was seldom ever without her Revlon apple polish lipstick. She just had certain signature touches that were so uniquely and personally hers. And when I expressed those things in the eulogy, everybody knew exactly what I was talking about. My kids, from a very young age, I would say, what makes you think of Mamu? And they would go like this, because she always had fun earrings on. So to me, it's all an expression of your style, your personality, and a degree of respect for yourself and for others. And it's just a way kind of to have fun. If it's not your shtick, I get it completely. There's no right or wrong answer. But for me, it's my number 2 thing that makes me feel more youthful and more energized. And that's caring about my appearance for myself and others. Now let's move on to number 3. Okay, well, I have to laugh about this one because it is the one I am most guilty of, and I am really working on it, I promise. And I think I've made some headway in the new year, and that is I need to quit whining, quit complaining. I'm not so bad about the grunting and groaning every time I get up and out of a chair, but those little expressions of old age that I think we fall into because we're not attentive to it. So my story on that one is that my first mother's mother, her name was Grandma Weigel, and we loved her, and God love her. She was grew up in the Depression, was an adult during the Depression. It went through hard times, including the loss of her daughter. But God love her. She was a whiner, and she just really liked to whine and complain a lot. And we didn't see her very often, but whenever we went to see her, before we would get down to the grandma stuff, we'd have to go through her litany of complaints and health issues and all of those kinds of things. And so we laugh about it, my brothers and sisters and we laugh about it. And I think I can remember, and it's similar to, remember when you were young and you wanted to get older faster and you wanted to be an adult faster, and so you would emulate your parents in some regards. So Stuart, do you remember when you started drinking coffee? When you first started drinking coffee, it wasn't something you really liked or whatever, but it made you feel more like an adult, and you were kind of copying your parents, and there was a commonality there. There was a love connection there. There was an umbilical cord thing because you wanted to be an adult too. So you started drinking coffee, and eventually you just got used to it and you got habituated to it. Well, I have found that making old age noises and complaining is the same thing. So I can remember my dad, every time he would get get up and out of his dad chair. He would grunt and he would groan when he'd sit back down, and he would make all of these noises. He'd creak or those, those kinds of things. And he would let the whole world know that he was sitting up, or he was sitting down, or he was standing up, and, he was getting older. And I noticed that for a while I started doing that same thing, just partly because I was emulating my parents and kind of copying them, like, oh, now we're getting old too. But you start doing that, starting out in kind of an ironic and a funny way, and before you know it, you're habituated to it, and you do it just as a matter of course. So every time you stand up or every time you sit down, you make a little grunt or a groan or, some kind of expression of discomfort, just because we're all getting older. And that's all fine and good, but there's a limit to those expressions of groaning. And my dad used to do it. I notice my husband does the same thing. And it's like making a pronouncement every time you stand up or sit down that you're old or getting older. So I think, as an expression of more youthful purportment, that every time you sit up and you bend down or whatever, you don't need to make a physical noise. I'm probably going to get a lot of pushback on this one, Stuart, but I have found it very true. Likewise, when I whine about everything, I'm always whining about, I'm so cold. Well, I'm sorry, that just probably makes me appear older and more fragile, and I don't need to do that. I don't need to complain so much when my stomach hurts or whatever. And I just don't need to complain and whine so much in general, because I have found that as we get older, we tend to do that. And here is another more recent example of that really brought this home to me. I was working out in the front yard, and people drive by in their cars. They're always stopping. They're always visiting. Sometimes I know them and sometimes I don't. But fairly recently, last fall, someone drove by, and this particular person I hadn't happened to have seen in probably 15 or 20 years and had not spoken to him. And it was an old boyfriend. They came by and I visited with him, and I won't go into anything about how he had aged physically or anything along those lines, his hairline, his waistline, or anything like that. But I will say that after talking to him for about 20 minutes, I thought to myself, boy, I don't remember you being such a curmudgeon, because every single topic I brought up, he would have some kind of Debbie Downer remark about, something unhappy or something unpleasant. Even if it was about pleasant things like his beautiful daughters or things like that, everything, there was some kind of detracting statement, and he just came off as just an old poopy curmudgeon. And I remember thinking, okay, maybe that was a little bit more attractive when you're young and in your 20s and 30s, and it comes off as kind of hip and cynical, but it just comes off as like a grumpy old man when you're older. So I know this person doesn't watch any of this kind of media, but that really brought it home to me that, sometimes you just don't have to put the worst spin on everything. Sometimes it makes the other person feel better if you acknowledge something that may be bad, but then you try to find some kind of redemption in the conversation. So, Stuart, do you agree with me on this at all? And this one in particular, I really would like to know your thoughts on. So that is not only how we carry ourselves, but how we communicate about ourselves and communicate with others. So now let's move on to number 4. Okay, this fourth one I'm going to make kind of brief because I think the words say it all, and that is to remain interesting, remain interested. And again, my mother-in-law, my mom, my second mom, they were brilliant about this. They were constantly interested in new things, what the latest tennis shoes were, what skincare product I was using, what book was I reading. If they were reading an article about about something, my mom would immediately like look it up, or if there was a word she didn't know, she would immediately look it up in the dictionary and then let, you know, whoever was in her midst share that information, because she just was kind of interested in everything. So I think my number 4 tip is just remain curious, and the more curious you remain, the more attractive you are to other people, because they know then that when you talk to them, you're curious about them as well. Well, number 5 is something that it's not just something that we attain at the end. One of my favorite expressions is happily ever after happens one day at a time. And I think all of life is just kind of a journey and happens one day at a time. And every day, hopefully, we're just a little bit wiser than we were the day before. So those of you that are in your 40s are probably wiser than your friends in your 30s. And those of you in your 50s, likewise. So I think there's always a value to constant learning and constant surrounding yourself with people from multiple generations, because multiple generations have different kinds of wisdom. Not all wisdom is born of having lived for a long time, but is born of life experiences. So to stay young and energetic, expose yourself to people of all age groups. One way that I have started doing this is because there's a large creative community in Oklahoma City, of which Stuart is a part. Some of the graphic designers I work with are a part of that. Most of them are younger, but it's a wonderful creative community, artistically, graphically, musically, and I tend to seek out those kinds of venues and events that will put me in touch with people of all different age groups and different disciplines. And so one of the things I love most about what Stuart and I do is that we work with people of all different age groups and backgrounds. And I love that because it helps us continually learn. We continually read. We continually try to learn something, even if it's fumbling through how to use a new app or something, which leads me to something else that I think is extremely difficult. To the extent possible, we need to learn to reduce our resistance to change. And I am very guilty of that because I don't like things to change. So I'm dealing with a number of issues in my life where things are changing. One of them being the climate in which I garden. And I'm really having a hard time dealing with that. But trying to deny it does no one any good, especially my garden. And so I'm trying to be a little bit less resistant to change, a little bit more adaptive, and a little bit more resilient. Am I that way every day? No. Is it a destination? No, it's a journey. So all of these things are just little different pick-me-ups that we can try to do on our good days so that it makes us feel less down on our bad days. So for whatever it's worth, you guys, those are just 5 tips that I try to think through to help me stay younger, feel younger, and be more energetic as I age. Let me know what you think in the comments below.